corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When it comes to the money you spend every day, we have you covered every morning. Making money makes sense. Weekdays on CBS Mornings.
Fox News says it has, quote, agreed to part ways, close quote, with host Tucker Carlson.
CNN also announced today it has parted ways with anchor Don Lemon.
Governor, I told Joe you falling behind Trump. Any thoughts on that?
I'm not a candidate, so we'll see if and when that changes.
We say pro-choice!
The issue of abortion will likely play a role in the 2024 elections.
This isn't a states-only decision. I think the American people would welcome a minimum national standard in Washington, D.C., 15 weeks.
Multiple sources tell CBS News the president may formally announce his re-election bid this week.
We will hold a vote this week and we will pass it and we will send it to the Senate. He needs to show leadership and come to the negotiating table instead of put us in default.
Busy Monday in Washington. Welcome to Red and Blue. I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns here in Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining us. Well, President Biden is expected to announce a re-election bid as soon as tomorrow. Sources tell CBS News that he is set to announce senior West Wing official and longtime Democratic Party activist Julie Chavez Rodriguez as his campaign manager. The president spent the weekend at Camp David with the First Lady and senior aides to sort out the final details of the campaign. And tomorrow would mark the anniversary of the day he announced his last presidential bid in 2019. So for more, let's bring in two of my CBS News colleagues who broke this story over the weekend. Ed O'Keefe and Finn Gomez join me now. Ed is CBS News senior White House and political correspondent, and Finn is CBS News political director. Great to see both of you. Thanks so much for being here. Ed, I want to start with you over on the North Lawn because, Biden has been teasing a little bit of this. I know you got a chance earlier today to throw a question at him. I want to play a little bit of that, and then we'll come back to you.
Mr. President, why do you want 4 more years?
So I get to answer your question.
Why should America give you 4 more years?
Stay tuned.
All right, Ed. So good effort there. I guess we will have to stay tuned. Tell us a little bit about what we should expect from this announcement that could come tomorrow.
We anticipate it's tomorrow. Caitlin, we anticipate it's coming in a short video message, similar to what many other candidates up and down a ballot these days do. What's unclear is whether he's going entirely into launching the campaign now for certain, or perhaps teasing the announcement in another way. It looks like it's leaning towards a full-throated announcement with staffing plans in the works. We reported, Finn and I, over the weekend that Julie Chavez Rodriguez, who has served as an assistant to the president and a senior advisor, which is about as high as you get in the West Wing staffing lineup before chief of staff and deputy chief of staff, is going to leave the White House to run the campaign. She is a longtime Democratic Party activist, worked for Kamala Harris's short-lived 2020 presidential campaign, was active especially in California politics for a while, is the granddaughter of the labor leader and civil rights leader Cesar Chavez. So, yes, putting her in this position is a nod to the power of the Latino vote and that coalition, especially in the Democratic Party. We can expect to see others who have been active in recent Democratic Party politics involved in the leadership of the campaign day to day, but also in more ceremonial chairman roles that will be held by various Democrats across the country. And then we wait to see how the president starts scheduling things officially and out on the campaign trail. And what will a campaign look like? Will it be events like the ones he held today in the Rose Garden with the National Teacher of the Year, or with the union group that he's meeting with tomorrow here in Washington in sort of official capacity, but as an announced candidate doing things, saying things that a Democratic presidential candidate would do to motivate the base? And the other big question is, how much money can this campaign raise and how quickly? One person I spoke with this afternoon who's been involved in the planning for this said that the big focus the rest of this week especially will be raising as much money as possible early on for an effort that Democrats have told Finn and I now is likely going to cost the campaign itself and the super PACs who love them and are working with them in a semi but not officially coordinated way, at least $2 billion to win in 2024.
Wow. I mean, that is such a staggering number when you think about it, especially for an incumbent president. But I want to talk a little bit more about the campaign manager, Rodriguez. I know you and Ed broke this news. Ed mentioned a little bit more about her. But what's the significance of this choice?
Julie Chavez Rodriguez. I spoke to several senior Democratic operatives and consultants in the Biden world and outside of Biden world who heartily applaud this. As Ed said, this pick is a big nod to the Latino electorate. It will be a crucial component of the president's reelection strategy, and also the fact that she is, as Ed mentioned, the granddaughter of Cesar Chavez, the iconic Latino leader, labor leader. But she's, in her own right, a big, significant leader in politics for years. I mean, she was the deputy campaign manager in 2020. She was the traveling chief of staff for Kamala Harris during that primary race. But she's also someone who's well respected across the Democratic groups, and it's something that I've heard heartily in speaking to many Democrats throughout the day.
The Latino vote is so interesting, too, because as you've reported extensively, there are concerns that Republicans are definitely making inroads with Latinos. So interesting pick there. Ed, I'm very curious about the timing of this, because I feel like in previous conversations that we all have had and in our own reporting, a lot of Democrats have kind of enjoyed just watching Republicans kind of squabble it out and figure out their own pathway for their nominees. Why now? Why do this now?
Tomorrow is the 4th anniversary of when he launched his 2020 bid. This is a guy who likes, as he likes to say, when hope and history rhyme, quoting that Seamus Heaney poem. And so this is good symmetry for him. He likes that. It also just gets it over with. He is known to be sort of frustrated with the questions that we continue to shout at him. As he said to us at an earlier event today that we couldn't quite hear, he said, I've been telling you I'm going to do this, right? He said it when he got back from Ireland. He had said it to a certain weatherman on another channel that we won't talk about. People may know which one I'm talking about. He has said it in other interviews that it was an intention to do this. So just get on with it already. The reason some Democrats were hoping he'd wait is, yes, they love seeing the media space focused on Donald Trump versus everybody else and what Republicans are doing politically and legislatively across the country on issues like abortion rights, gun control, education, to essentially set themselves up for some real, what Democrats believe to be easy general election attacks on issues that voters don't side with them on. But they also just know that he wasn't facing a serious primary challenge. Earlier this year, late last year, there was concern in the Biden camp that California Governor Gavin Newsom, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, somebody else might try to mount a primary challenge against him. But they all did the math. They looked around and realized they can't beat him. Despite the age issue, there was no reason to go after him. And so while there is token opposition from Robert Kennedy Jr. and Marianne Williamson, two activists, they know he's basically got the party behind him, and the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, intends to work on his behalf with his campaign to make it happen. So, yes, but the other, again, like we said, the issue now is spend the next few weeks especially raising as much money as possible to get started. Watch super PACs start to do the same. Expect to see donors start opening up their wallets to do it. There is still scheduled to be an event here in Washington on Friday for about 100 or so donors who've raised at least $1 million for the campaign in the past and are being asked to do so again. We'll see if they stick around through Saturday to get another briefing from other administration or campaign officials. And so it's getting started. But for now, what he can do mostly is raise the money, hire out the staff, set them out across the country, and watch as Republicans continue to fight amongst themselves over who should be their nominee.
And speaking of some of those Republicans fighting amongst themselves, Finn, the Republican race has already been well underway, but we're still waiting for some candidates to get in. Sure. Ron DeSantis, of course, everybody's eyeing him to see what he does. He has been out across the world, really, on this tour. I want to play a little bit of sound when he was in Japan. He was asked about the presidential race here at home. Let's listen to that.
Governor, a poll show you falling behind Trump. Any thoughts on that?
I'm not a candidate, so we'll see if and when that changes.
All right, so DeSantis is essentially on a trade mission trying to represent Florida, which I also think is really interesting that he's doing that. What do you make of what he just said there? I mean, we've seen for the past several weeks Donald Trump going after him, and now his super PAC, DeSantis' super PAC, or one associated with him, is starting to sharpen their knives a little bit, too. What do you make of what he said there?
I think it's a little head bob of uncertainty, frankly. I mean, but I do think that, you're seeing all signs indicate that he is going to jump in after his legislative sessions over in Tallahassee. His camp, his PAC, his super PAC, is revving up their activity, and they're being more vocal and in criticism towards Trump. But I also think that the fact of the matter is that Ron DeSantis does not do media. He rarely does interviews with mainstream outlets. He really does these he doesn't go unless it's friendly outlets. He really doesn't do this, and I think this is a disservice to him because once this, and if he does jump in, and if he's on the debate stage, will he be prepared to encounter Donald Trump and some of the other potential rivals, right? And I think this world tour is an effort to bolster his foreign policy credentials. I think it's interesting that he's also doing it. It's unusual that he's doing this just before the G7 meets in Hiroshima next month as well. But this is I believe a weak spot for him. And just over, you mentioned trade, CHP. I think it is interesting that Trump has been for years so critical of trade with Japan, and the fact that he's very positive here in his comments towards the prime minister, I think might be an effort to challenge Trump's position on that.
Yeah, one of those contrasts that we may be seeing play out. It's also interesting too how he seems to be, wanting to present Florida as its own country, essentially, right? I mean, being the head of that state. I know you just got back from Iowa too, where you and Robert Costa talked to Mike Pence. Did you get a sense from voters? I mean, it seems so early, and it seems like they're just sussing out the field right now. But does there seem to be an appetite for some kind of turning of the page? Someone like a DeSantis or a Pence, or are people just kind of waiting to see what happens?
I think it's still Donald Trump's game at this point. I mean, he was not in Iowa this weekend at the Evangelical Faith and Freedom event that was occurring in Clive, Iowa. But I do think still with his massive presence, if you will, there is room. I mean, Mike Pence got a standing ovation by the 1,000+ crowd that was there. You saw even Vivek Ramaswamy, the multimillionaire entrepreneur, getting a positive response from the crowd there. He was even, you saw others. They were there, including like Larry Elder. You saw Asa Hutchinson. I think there is room, especially in that state where the evangelical vote is so strong. So I think that you will see those efforts to get some traction there.
Yeah, a lot of competition still to go, and we'll see what happens tomorrow. Finn, Ed, thank you both. Thanks for breaking some big news over the weekend, and we will talk to you soon as this campaign gets underway. And tonight, we have some exciting news of our own to break right here. Red and Blue is getting a new name 1 week from tonight. On May 1st, Red and Blue becomes America Decides. Same time, same place, same focus on original reporting, smart analysis, and conversations with political decision makers from Washington and beyond. My colleagues and I here in Washington will keep a focus on the 2024 campaign, as we just discussed, and the issues that will drive voters' decision making in the primaries and in the general election. We will continue holding leaders on Capitol Hill and the White House to account as well. So we all hope you'll join us on Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern for America Decides. And this week will be a major test for House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. He remains confident that his debt limit bill will pass the narrowly divided House, but does he actually have the votes? You're streaming Red and Blue, reporting across the political divide.
Welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Morning news matters because it sets the tone for your day, and it's a way of getting you started.
We're going to uplift you. We're going to send you out your way. Day to day, that first draft of history, it happens right here.
CBS Mornings.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
I always tell people that Twitter would not be Twitter without Black Twitter. It's just us being in fellowship with each other.
And it becomes a conversation you don't want to be left out of.
People really started to recognize the power of activism on Twitter.
Based on that one tweet, the hashtag #OscarSoWhite was trending around the world.
If anything has really powered Black Twitter, it's been humor.
If your food ain't right, oh, we're going to tell you about that too.
We tend to create change, create culture and cool.
That's how movements happen on Black Twitter and go beyond more than that.
Black Twitter, the Twitterverse that changed a generation. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
Or you can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
We go to stories because we can bring someone to that story. That human connection is incredibly important. The news doesn't have to be depressing.
What do you love about running? Energy!
It can be uplifting.
And welcome back to Red and Blue. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy says he has the votes to pass his debt limit bill. The plan would raise the debt ceiling by $1.5 trillion or through the end of next year, whichever comes first. It limits government growth to 1% over the next decade, and it promises $4.5 trillion in spending cuts. CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian joins us now here on set. Good to have you. I do want to get to Kevin McCarthy, but first, there's some breaking news about the DA in Georgia. I know you've been covering this case extensively. She says that we might prepare for charges to be filed against Donald Trump this summer.
She wasn't that explicit, Caitlin. Okay. This is DA Fani Willis, who is currently overseeing the investigation into the former president, into whether or not there was election interference in that state. And so she sent a letter to the Fulton County Sheriff, basically kind of putting him on notice, saying, I may be making an announcement sometime between July 11th and September 1st. And so given the interest in this case, you know, it was kind of just a heads up to law enforcement, just so they can start making preparations. I mean, we certainly saw in Manhattan right before that indictment came down, law enforcement really had, and that's in part how we found out that an indictment could even potentially happen, simply because we saw that law enforcement presence. That not only was law enforcement put on notice, but then we saw that stepped up presence in the days leading up to the former president coming in Manhattan. So similarly in Georgia, I think the district attorney is just trying to put law enforcement on notice, but this is significant because we have been wondering for weeks, if not months, how far along this investigation is, when she might make a decision, and this is really the first time we have seen concrete dates that she may be nearing the end of this probe.
Yeah, it's an important reminder that as much as we've been covering the Manhattan investigation, that these other investigations have been looming, and this is something that a lot of other Republicans are looking at to see when and if there is an answer to those. So we will stay tuned to that. Okay, let's come back here to Washington and talk about Kevin McCarthy. He seems confident that he has the votes. I want to play a little sound from an interview that he did talking about kind of where he is.
We will hold a vote this week and we will pass it and we will send it to the Senate. And for more than 80 days where the president has ignored us, called people names for things that he even voted for himself, makes no sense or logic to it. I think as president and the leader of the free world, this is one of the problems we have, challenges around this country, around the world. He needs to show leadership and come to the negotiating table instead of put us in default. This is risky what he's doing. He's threatening the markets.
So he says he has the votes. I know you covered his speakership race very, very closely. Do you think that he does have the votes here? I mean, have Republicans coalesced around this plan?
Well, as you know, the speaker is kind of a half-glass-full guy, so he has continued to exude confidence that not only will he get this done this week, but that he will have the votes. He said as much to me last week, and he has reiterated that, you know, in his most recent appearance on Sunday. But that being said, you know, we do know that there are some Republicans who have some issues with the bill, whether it's the issue of work requirements, whether it's rolling back some of these energy tax credits by rolling back parts of the Inflation Reduction Act, which could hurt their districts. So we do know there's been a lot of arm wrangling and arm twisting over the weekend to try to get party rank and file in line. Of course, we'll have to see as lawmakers return tomorrow. They were out today, whether or not Republican leadership was able to change any minds, because they can only suffer, as you know, 4 defections. And as of our count late last week, there were about at least 10 Republicans we were hearing who may not be on board.
Doing basic math, that doesn't quite add up. Okay.
But again, some may, you know, now that lawmakers have had a chance to read the bill, and again, given some of these conversations that are happening behind the scenes, at least Republican leadership seems pretty confident they can get this through this week.
That clock certainly is ticking. One other item to get to, Clarence Thomas and calls for some kind of ethics investigation into him. I want to play a little bit of sound from Dick Durbin, who chairs the Judiciary Committee, what he wants to do.
If this were another judge, if this were a member of Congress, and it happened that some Texas billionaire came in and said, I'm going to buy your mom's house and the house is nearby and own this so she doesn't have to pay rent or a mortgage payment, you'd say to yourself, well, that's obvious. That's the sort of thing that needs to be disclosed. And I think Chief Justice should appear before our committee and explain something or explain the changes that he's going to make.
So he wants Chief Justice Roberts to appear before the committee. Is that likely at all?
Well, this hearing is still about a week away. But that being said, right now, the Chief Justice appears to be punting a decision. You know, he gave a response to the committee, and he didn't exactly say yes, but he didn't exactly say no either. But he basically punted and said that this matter would be reviewed by the Judicial Conference. And while that's all and well good with the Judiciary Chairman, at the end of the day, as he explained, he feels that this is the Chief Justice's court, that he does need to explain the actions of Chief Justice Thomas. And he said one of the reasons he didn't even invite Justice Thomas is because he didn't even think Thomas would come in. He seems to have a little bit more faith that Roberts might. But again, it seems like a heavy lift. Either way, Durbin has made clear this hearing will go forth with or without the Chief Justice or Justice Thomas.
Yeah, a lot of spotlight on the ethics rules for Supreme Court justices, especially compared to members of Congress. You have a busy week ahead of you here in Washington. Nicole Killian, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
And coming up, a series of high-profile cable news exits today could have broader implications for the Republican Party heading into 2024. We'll explain all of that next. You're streaming Red and Blue.
An original documentary from CBS Reports. Controversial Congressman George Santos.
Why won't you answer our questions?
How did he manage to get elected?
Thank you very much, and God bless you, and God bless the USA.
George Santos' campaign was a campaign of deceit, lies, fabrication.
And who is he, really?
I knew him as Anthony Dvoldar from Queens.
Really, who he is, he's a fraud.
I compare him to the Tinder swindler.
From people who know him, the truth, the facts, the lies.
He would say that he was worth $100 million.
It's an incredibly cynical episode in American politics, beyond satire.
Had you ever seen anything like this?
No, and I hope I never see it again.
Campaign of Deceit, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She dazzled on the court and off the court as a businesswoman.
Thank you for joining us on Person to Person. Tennis superstar and entrepreneur Serena Williams.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
I asked my students, what are we going to do about racism in the United States?
The backlash over teaching about racism in American schools.
I don't think it has any place in the classroom.
We can either pretend and say, no, we're not racist and we're all great people, or we can actually start to do the really, really hard work of addressing it.
How did you lose your job? I made the statement that white privilege is a fact.
Is it helping diversity and inclusion?
When you bring in different people's stories and experience, it enriches education.
If you don't talk about something, it doesn't go away.
Or driving us further apart?
What schools are doing to our children in the name of anti-racism is in fact teaching them racism.
The intention is to put us in this war against each other.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
I was entitled to equal pay for equal work under the law.
Does the Supreme Court's power need to be checked?
9 Supreme Court justices, 5 of them said no, she's not entitled. That's not right.
Calls to fix the court tend to go along with the politics of the moment.
Republican-appointed justices have all tended to go in one direction, with the Democratic-appointed justices tending to go in another.
Even though it's only 9 justices, it takes 5 of them to make the law of the land.
Does it have political impact? True. Political intent? Probably not true.
If the American people don't trust the judgment of their court, that's a real problem for our democracy.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. Tucker Carlson and Fox News parted ways today. The network announced that in a statement. Carlson's final broadcast aired last Friday. News of his departure comes days after the network reached a $787.5 million settlement with Dominion Voting Systems. Carlson had also been named as a defendant in a federal lawsuit filed by a former senior producer for his show, who alleged that she endured misogynistic and a hostile environment while working on Tucker Carlson Tonight. So for more on this, CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa joins us now. I want to talk just kind of big picture here, because Tucker Carlson has been such a key figure in Republican Party politics post-Trump. What does this departure, portend for this upcoming primary?
Good to be with you, Caitlin. Several associates of Tucker Carlson tell CBS News that they do not expect him to mount a run for political office, including a run for the Republican presidential nomination in 2024. Okay. They say that Carlson prizes having a private life, that while he has been encouraged to run for office at different times in the past, it's not something that is on his radar in any way. And he was asked about it last year during a meeting with some House Republicans. And again, even in private, in confidence, he told them, according to our reporting, that he's not interested in ever running for president.
So this isn't some bigger ambition beyond television, but I am curious kind of what this void means in terms of, as we're looking, at this primary. I mean, he was very close to the former president, but also had some very critical words for him, according to what we saw in that lawsuit. Do you think that this makes a difference here? I mean, candidates have gone to Fox News as a place to give a lot of interviews, especially during this primary.
Fox News remains a place where many Republican contenders continue to appear. They also appear on other networks, including on CBS News from time to time. What we're seeing right now with Tucker Carlson is a lot of shock inside the right wing of the Republican Party, inside conservative media. He has been a highly rated figure for many years, someone who had a convening power for those who had ambitions inside the Republican Party, especially on the presidential level or on the congressional level. And so many Republicans had believed that he carried immense political capital with his program, and they would take cues from him from time to time about where the party's base might be leaning on a particular issue. So that guidance, that beacon politically for some of these Republicans, particularly in the House, will now be no longer there.
Speaking of Republicans who talk to other media outlets, you sat down with former Vice President Mike Pence over the weekend, and he gave you a little bit more information about what kind of timeline he's thinking about for running for president. What did he tell you?
Former Vice President Pence is still making a decision about whether he will run. I said, are you leaning in or leaning away from getting into the Republican presidential race? He said, well, I'm in Iowa. And I said, that's quite a tell. So he seems to be leaning toward a run, though he keeps pushing his timeline down. He had said about 6 months ago he was going to discuss it over the holidays with his family. Now it's almost May, the year before an election, still in that deciding mode for the former vice president. And we'll see what happens.
Yeah, those big debates start in August, so they're going to have to get in by then if they do. Bob Costa, thank you. Great interview in Iowa over the weekend, and that does it for us today. But a quick note before we go. CBS News chief medical correspondent Dr. John LaPook will discuss his investigation into hospital closures. That's tonight on Prime Time with John Dickerson at 7 p.m. Eastern right here on CBS News. That does it for us today. You can stream Red and Blue Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You're streaming CBS News.
In today's Money Watch, business analyst Jill Schlesinger is here to help.
How do you even begin to make the best use of your money?
If you've got a match from your employer, don't give away that money.
Dollar Jill, y'all.
CBS Mornings, starting at 7.